John Vandenberg and Deborah Metsger are going to present a session titled My Passion for Plants, A Lifelong Learning. This presentation is inspired by ROM's recent acquisition of 1,000 botanical illustrations by John Vandenberg. He and Deborah will explore the processes he used in creating botanical illustrations, the importance of scientific art as a unique discipline, and the significance of having these images reside alongside botanical specimens. Deborah Metsger is Assistant Curator of Plants at ROM and co-author of the recently published edition of The Field Guide to the Trees of Ontario. John Vandenberg is a retired science and horticulture teacher whose second career as a botanical illustrator resulted in the donation of 1,001 plant portraits to ROM's Green Plant Herbarium in 2022. Welcome, Deb and John.
Thank you, Valerie, very much, and thank you all for coming this afternoon to join us. And thank you, Akiko and Greg. That was a wonderful introductory talk. So as Valerie said, I am Deb Metsger, the curator of the plants collection at the ROM. And the first time that I met John was in 2021 in his driveway up in Janettville at a tailgate party to celebrate the publication of the City of Kawartha Lakes flora. We had a wonderful session with some mimosas, and then John asked me to come inside and see his drawings. It was only 11 o'clock in the morning, and his wife Fien was there, so it was quite a lovely introduction. John, had by that point produced a lot of drawings for the CKL Flora, which was a project that the ROM had been a collaborator on, and it was a project of our herbarium, the plant collection here at the ROM. So a lot of people have asked, how does art fit into a collection of scientific specimens? This is an example of many of the collections that we have in our holdings. They are mostly dried and pressed specimens, and here they range from historical specimens, specimens from around the world, specimens generated through research, specimens generated through floristic and biodiversity studies, and they provide essentially a library of biodiversity that is increasingly important as we try to mitigate against habitat loss and climate change. We don't just have vascular plants as we saw there, we also have mosses, and these are actually specimens that were donated by a another passionate collector and artist, and you can see how he has used on the right-hand side drawings to illustrate the tiny, tiny plants that are up in the top corner. In fact, botanical art and illustration goes hand in hand with the study of botany and also with the study of many different natural history disciplines. When specimens come into collections, they are dried, they are pressed, they are fragmentary, as Greg has shown in some of the things of the wood. And botanical illustration actually is a great way to bring that plant to life. All of these were done in the heyday of botanical illustration in the 1700s, and you can see the different styles that have happened over time. When we moved into the 20th century with the advent of photography, we tended to think, oh, we can just take a photograph of that plant and that'll be sufficient. But you can see that even though these are beautiful, detailed photographs, again, from the ROM's collection and from those taken by a private botanical photographer, it's hard to get at the kind of detail that you would need to identify a plant. And so they are great communication tools and things that we can use to bring those plants to life, but they're not all that you need. So a very good botanical illustration allows you to get at the kind of detail that you need to be able to truly tell what you're looking at and to identify a plant to species. And so what we'd like to do for the remainder of this presentation is look at John's career as an artist and at how the drawings that have been donated to the ROM came to be. And I would say that that's from a combination of passion and serendipity, as you'll see. So John, can you begin by telling us a little bit about where you come from and how your botanical interests in things started?
First of all, I would like to express my pleasure in being here this afternoon. This is part of my lifelong learning experience. This is the first time I have done anything like this. My interest in botany and in art started in the Netherlands when I was about 4. And one of my brightest memories is my grandmother's blue delphiniums. When I came to Canada, we moved into an area where we had the Carolinian ecosystem on the southern shore of Lake Ontario. There I experienced the poison ivy vine climbing to the top of the trees. After going to Western and studying botany, I went into teaching, and I taught horticulture with a big greenhouse, and I did that one for about, I think 10 years. We bought a small property near Janetville, Lindsay, 2 acres, and the 2 acres have become my garden. And about 3/4 of it is let nature do what nature needs to do. In other words, I basically leave it alone. My art interest was something that was a part of everything I had done, but very small little bits and pieces all along. When I retired, I was looking for something to do. And one of the things I did was to audit courses at the Sir Sandford Fleming College in Lindsay. And one of the courses was a course in aquatics. And this is where I had the pleasure of going out with the students to do a fish study. And I was the one who was chosen to electrocute the fish so that they floated, and then they did all of the measurements, etc. Part of that course was the study of the algae. And I found that the illustrations that were in the texts, I found them inadequate. So I thought, well, I can, and I did, buy a good microscope, which eventually resulted in 500 drawings of the freshwater algae of the city of Kawartha Lakes. And these are now part of the loan. It's a loan to the museum. What we have on the screen is a diatom, a glass structure. They are microscopic, and the worldwide known example of diatoms are the White Cliffs of Dover. This is another diatom that lives as a colony. I forget what this one was.
But we do know from having had an algal expert look at these that they're good enough drawings that she will be able to give us identifications where John has not.
This is a fibrous filamentous algae that enjoys living in your swimming pool.
So from algae, how did we go to plants?
I had shown the algae drawings to one of the authors of the Flora for the Kawartha Lakes, and this is Dale Leadbeater, I believe, who is here today. And I understand that she was, can I say impressed?
I think so.
Can I?
I think you can.
So she asked me, and along with Ann Barber, whether I would be interested in illustrating the flora. And of course, I took the opportunity to do so. They originally asked for 120 drawings, and that went down to 60. And then I believe that they ended up publishing 32 in the flora. I was so completely taken by the process and the exploration of my own backyard that I ended up by now drawing about 1,500 drawings.
So John, this is one of the drawings that you have done for the City of Kawartha Lakes flora. Tell me a little bit about it.
This is a very small orchid. It's a parasite. In other words, it's not green. It's very rare in Ontario. I believe there's only 3 or 4 places where it grows. I did find it in the City of Kawartha Lakes, did not know what it was. And not knowing, I actually took a sample, which I would never do it now. And it's, I believe it's about this tall.
It's a very tiny little plant, and this is the specimen that corresponds to this. So one of the beauties and the reasons for the correlation between John's drawings and the project is that the City of Kawartha Lakes flora ended up producing 1,500 specimens. A flora is actually a document of everything growing in a region. And so in this case, John's drawings provide the very detailed information about something that is also on a specimen. And when we put that into our database, the two things will be linked together. So John, this is another one that you did. This is common pippawiswa. Can you tell me a little bit about that plant?
This pipsqueak?
Pippawiswa. Pippiswa. Something like that. We'll go by Chimophila umbellata, which is what I'm much more comfortable with.
This flower is, I would say, about it's less than a centimeter across, and this shows you what a microscope can do. I do about a half of my drawings with a dissecting microscope, which then magnifies the drawing so that I can produce a drawing that is as detailed, showing the very, very small structure. If you look to the left at the photograph, to the left it gives you approximately the size of the flower, and the drawings allows me to emphasize the fine structure and allows me to do it in such a way that things like color, etc., do not overshadow the shape, the structure.
So
frankly, I find this thing really a beautiful thing.
Well, the photograph shows the beauty of the individual flowers, and the really the illustration shows the architecture. So let's look at John's artistic process, which is one of the things that I've really found quite exciting.
This is part of my backyard. I enjoy growing whatever happens to grow. So I have the brown-eyed Susan, I've got a mullein, I've got the black locust, and any other wildflower plant that happens to end up in my garden. This is part of the pleasure I have of doing these drawings. I do them from live specimens. I cannot do it from a photograph.
And so what that means in practicality is that I think if you looked in John's fridge, you would probably find a whole bunch of bouquets.
The first step in the process is what I call the puzzle. I go to the literature to identify the specimen, and I even will go to the literature to look at the information that it gives me that I can't necessarily seize, even though I know it's a dandelion. Next, I go to the internet, which is a whole new learning experience for me. I'm a computer idiot. But I do use it to go to specific sites to get information about the specimen. And then I use it specifically to go to a website called VasCan, which gives me the information that is used in Canada for the vascular plants.
So by the time we see John's drawings, they have the current name of the plant, which is really important and is bringing them so that they are scientifically up to date.
The next step, about half the time I will use the microscope if I'm looking at very, very small structures. And frankly, some of them are really quite amazing. And these little things grow in my backyard. I use the microscope, and then after the microscope, then I take a specimen, and this is a branch of the balsam poplar, and I do a line drawing on a piece of paper, just paper. After the line drawing, I transfer the line drawing to the final paper. Paper is unforgiving when you are drawing. You cannot repair, erase without denting the paper, and it will leave a mark. So I need to keep the paper clean. After I've transferred the drawing, then I do a very fine, detailed line drawing of, in this case, the branch of the balsam poplar. Then I use the pencils all the way from the hardest and the softest pencils I can get by, and create the three-dimensional shape on a two-dimensional sheet of paper. And that would complete the drawing of the, for example, the black spruce cone that was at the beginning. Once the drawing is finished, I fix it, because the graphite is very loose can be very loose on the paper, and I need to use a very expensive hairspray to make sure that the image does not smudge. The last step is to prepare the page that goes along with each drawing, which documents all of the information that I have concerning the plant, where I found it, GPS location, English name, and its taxonomy.
And so this is the completed drawing in the books, and so we received all of John's drawings within the books. And that's what it looks like when it's done. And I think this is an incredible, I know the frame is a new advent in your style, but I feel like I'm standing in front of that white spruce branch as it comes out at me.
This is a comparison between the prep drawing and then the very final drawing of the base of the 5 needles in a white pine.
And any of you who have ever grabbed a white pine bundle to see whether it's white or a different species by counting your letters out has never, I'm sure, looked at it in that level of detail. So John, I know that your style and all your thinking about your art has changed over time as part of the lifelong learning process. Can we look at some of the illustrations and see how that has changed?
This is one of the earlier drawings. In this case, I have 3 layers, 3 magnifications. So on the left side are 4 spikes of the flowers of a grass, and in the middle is 1 branch or 2 branches, and in the background is the life size of that particular grass.
And this is a technique that is often used of putting everything on one page, as you've done here with this Eastern hop hornbeam.
One of the things that has changed over the last number of years in doing these drawings is to reduce the complexity of the composition, so that in this case the catkins stand by themselves and not be overshadowed by the complexity of the material in behind. This is the woolly blue violet in the fall, and again, very complex. Even for myself, I would have to study that. In other words, look at it carefully to see all of the information that is there.
But if you look very closely in the middle, there is actually a seed pod.
And there's the seed pod by itself, its seeds magnified to the point where even the seeds, I'm able to draw the textures and the structure of the seed. Seeds are amazing. They really are, and they're so tiny, and frankly, I find them almost something that would be make a beautiful sculpture. My training as an artist, I have no formal training. I took a studio course at the University in Trent. I've taken many workshops, including Japanese brush painting, etc. Celia Godkin is, I spent 3 days with her. She is a professional illustrator. So she helped me deal with some of the issues that I hadn't been exposed to or hadn't learned on my own. So Cecilia pointed out some of the things that would help tweak my drawings.
Yes.
And here's an example. This is the bark of a branch of the black walnut, the 2 sides. On the left-hand side, I've used a illustrator's technique of having the light come from the upper left. And there's a good reason for that, which I won't go into. But if the lighting comes from the upper left, because of our culture, when the light hits in a certain way, it'll either create the image of a dip or a bump. And it depends on where the light is coming from. So in this case, the cracks in the bark on the left-hand side, for me, it does look as if it's under the surface of the darker part of the bark.
But what have you done with the right-hand side?
The right-hand side, I've become the artist as opposed to the illustrator. I simply decided to put the lighting coming from the right side. And I took a good look at other artists' work. Artists tend to have their light coming from wherever they want. And sometimes it's from 2 or 3 lighting. And I look at where I work, and I've got 4 or 5 different sources of lights, windows and lights coming from everywhere. So as considering myself more of an artist than an illustrator, I take the liberty of having my light source wherever I want. This is an example of increasing the value, the lightness and the darkness in a drawing. When I use the lightest I can get, which is the white of the paper, or the darkest black I can get, which is the 8B pencil, it makes the drawing almost come out of the page.
And for any of you in the audience, I know there are a few who are botanists. This is a sedge, this is carex, this is the nemesis of most of us. A plant that has very, very tiny little flowers. And John has dissected this and shown all of the parts really, really clearly. So when we go back to thinking what are the value of these things and of these things to science, it's having this level of detail and this level of clarity.
This is another example of using the higher contrast. On the left is a very early drawing of oak, and on the right, because I've used a much darker black in the needles in behind the cones, it makes the image come forward. And the lighter is fine, good.
Sorry, the finger went quickly. So, John, I know that you are a botanist and a naturalist by nature, and I know that you've used that a lot in looking at things. And Greg, I can't thank you enough for your exploring wood first, because this will help us explain this drawing. So, John?
I enjoy putting the plant or the drawing I do in its natural habitat. So I really enjoy including things that are part of the plant's life in my drawings. And in this case, these are two drawings of the feeding pits for the yellow-bellied sapsucker woodpecker. So on the upper right are 3 feeding pits where the woodpecker has drilled the hole into the bark, and this would have been done in the last growing season. On the right is a frontal view of the feeding pit, 2 of them, and around the drawing are the lichens that are growing on the bark. So instead of just simply having the plant, I really enjoy putting into the drawing part of its life, which includes whatever is eating it, whatever is growing on it.
So one of the things here, so this is the buckthorn. Some of you know we think of this as an evil plant. It's a plant that is an invasive species here in Ontario and in many other places, and it's great that the sapsucker is going after it. Going back to Greg's talk, what is happening there is the sap is coming up in the phloem that is right underneath the bark there. So you can see how the woodpecker is actually going in to the bark, and that's how they're able to get the sap. And I never, before seeing this drawing, would have realized that was exactly what's going on. We just see holes in the outside of the tree.
This drawing of the brown-eyed Susan, again, I'm including where the insects have eaten part of the plant, because it's a relationship between the insect and the plant. I've also included in the leaf at the very right bottom the parts that have died and that have wrinkled. And I find that it adds a natural aspect to the drawings rather than simply being the perfect rose.
So John, from the beginning of you telling me about your drawings, you've always described them as plant portraits.
Yes.
And you have distinguished that between a traditional botanical illustration or even botanical art. In that many of the things, if you go back to some of those first images that I showed, people will take many different specimens and then they'll create an ideal plant that is something that shows you all the features you need to see, but it may not be one that you would find in nature. The difference with these illustrations are that they are ones that are actually what you see is what you get, and they are an interpretation of what John has seen in nature.
The next set of slides, I guess they're slides, are they?
They are slides.
Whatever. Is showing the difference between one species and another when they belong to the same group. These are the black-eyed.
These are the
brown-eyed-
Rudbeckia is the
Rudbeckia.
genus, black-eyed, brown-eyed Susans, and some of the composite plants that we see in the fall. And these have all been done in November, not a time that we often look at these plants, but it's as the seeds are beginning to come off the head of the plant. So this is the brown-eyed Susan, and if you look closely at the receptacle in the middle, the cone-shaped part, where the disc flowers are found, this is the cut-leaved coneflower, Rudbeckia laciniata, and you can see that it's got a very tall, different shape to its cone in the middle, to the receptacle. And this is black-eyed Susan, the one that we all know. And I just love the way that John has shown what it looks like as the individual seeds are coming off the middle of the receptacle, and how you get that incredible spiral that's coming around. The other thing that you see here is other features of the plant. This one, the bracts that are beneath are very, very hairy, whereas if we go back to the one before, you can see that they're very smooth. So this is how an illustration is able to give you the kind of detail, and how the use of the microscope has allowed, and the combination of life size and microscope has allowed us to get incredible information out of these drawings.
One of the very pleasant things in doing this kind of a drawing is that I see them aging the same way I do. This is another example of showing the structure of and the biology of a plant. This one I find very interesting. The awn. In the right and the left-hand side at the top is the awn, and there's a vertical part and the part that goes across. And I don't know if you can see it. There's a spiral there. The spiral is used to allow the seed to crawl away from its mother plant. When the awn, the spiral part, gets wet, the top part of the awn turns in one direction. When it dries out, the other part, the same part, turns in the other direction, and slowly it pulls itself away from mother.
So a great example of seed dispersal. This is one, this is pussy toes. I have this in my garden, and I've had to confine it into a very tight space, because although it looks like it's one plant, it's actually many. And John, you've shown the rhizomes here.
If you have a plant this big in your yard, that's one plant instead of a whole bunch. They're all connected underneath.
So showing the underground parts as well as the above ground ones.
This is the lady's thumb. This one has special meaning to me. My granddaughter went for a canoe ride up by Wilberforce someplace, and brought me back this flower, and beautiful deep pink flowers. And of course I had to draw that. And so now in the data, I have listed my granddaughter as the collector.
This particular plant has dimorphic leaves. The leaves that are seen above the ground, the terrestrial sorts of leaves, are very different shape than the ones underwater. So the line there is the water line, and you can see the two different kinds of leaves that you get on this plant.
This one is a very small orchid. The drawings on the left are life size, and I guess they're not that big.
No, No, they're not that big.
No.
This was one that you said was an escape, that it was a hitchhiker that was in amongst other things. And John actually ended up drawing it once he had it, and then taking it back to the woods and planting it where it belonged.
What am I going to do with these drawings? When I was asking this question, I already had close to 1,000 done. And I really did think that I wanted to keep them in one place instead of having them scattered. And I realized that should I give them, let's say, to my grandkids, 2 or 3 generations down the road, these books get stuck on a shelf someplace. Many of the drawings are highly specialized, and slowly they would be separated and possibly disappear. So my way of dealing with that issue was to ask Dale Leadbeater, who is one of the authors of the Flora of the City of Kawartha Lakes, what do I do with these things? And she suggested that the ROM might be interested in having them. So there you are. Now it's your turn.
Now it's my turn. So hence back to our tailgate party back in 2021, where I was introduced to these drawings. And as you can see, and I think tell from John's enthusiasm and all of the biology and the other things that he's brought into them, they were certainly something that we were interested in. It very much fits within our mandate of art, culture, nature. It augments the City of Kawartha Lakes Flora project, which the ROM is very much a part. And it also gives us just a tremendous body of work. John has not only given the first 1,001, but would like to give the rest as a legacy gift to the ROM. I'm not sure when he's going to stop, so I'm not sure how many we will have in the end. But this was John on the day that I went to pick up the books. And you can see there was a big smile on his face and also a smile on mine. So John, on behalf of myself, of the ROM, and of the people of Ontario, thank you so much for all that you've given us.